She extended her hand across the table. A simple gesture. Professional. Polite. What happened next would cost $2.4 billion and destroy a company overnight. But here's what nobody in that room understood. She wanted them to refuse. She was counting on it. This is the story of the most expensive handshake that never happened. Let me tell you about a woman who changed everything with 5 words and a phone call. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand who she was and why what happened that day mattered so much. Her name was Nia Bennett, and on a Tuesday morning in downtown Atlanta, she walked into a boardroom that would try to break her. What nobody in that room understood was this: Nia Bennett didn't break. She had been tested by fire too many times. She had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed so often that she'd learned something powerful, something that would cost them everything. She'd learned to be patient. She'd learned to be prepared. And most importantly, she'd learned that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the beginning. Nia built Bennett Capital from absolutely nothing. No family money. No powerful connections. No shortcuts. Just her, a laptop, and a dream that everyone told her was impossible. Women don't succeed in private equity, they said. You're too young, they said. Maybe you should try something more suitable, they said. She heard it all. Every condescending smile. Every door closed in her face. Every investor who looked past her like she was invisible. But here's what they didn't know about Nia Bennett. Every no she received didn't discourage her. It educated her. She studied those men who rejected her. She watched how they moved, how they talked, how they made deals. She learned their patterns, their weaknesses, their tells. And slowly, deal by deal, contract by contract, she built something they couldn't ignore. Bennett Capital became one of the most respected investment firms in the country. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but when Nia Bennett's name appeared on a contract, people paid attention. Because she had something rare in that world: integrity and intelligence wrapped in unshakable calm. 10 years. That's how long it took her to build what she had. 10 years of proving herself over and over again. 10 years of being twice as good to get half the credit. 10 years of smiling through disrespect because she was playing a longer game than anyone realized. And now, finally, she'd reached a moment that could change everything. A merger. $2.4 billion. The kind of deal that gets written about in business journals and studied in MBA programs. If this went through, Bennett Capital would be untouchable. Nia would have the kind of power that nobody could question or diminish. The company on the other side? Carter Industries, a massive conglomerate that dominated 3 industries and was run by a woman named Evelyn Carter. Now, here's what you need to understand about Evelyn Carter. She was successful. Incredibly successful. She'd inherited her father's company and somehow made it even bigger. Boardrooms feared her. Competitors avoided her. Investors worshipped her. But Evelyn Carter's power came from a different place than Nia's. Evelyn believed that power meant control. That respect was something you took, not earned. That some people were simply born to lead, and others were born to follow. She looked at the world like a kingdom, and she was the queen. So, when Nia Bennett's name came across her desk for this merger, Evelyn saw an opportunity. Not just for business, but for something else. Something darker. She saw a chance to remind everyone, especially Nia, where the real power lived. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Carter Tower, 38th floor, a glass-walled boardroom that looked out over the entire city of Atlanta. Everything about that room was designed to make you feel small. The ceiling stretched up forever. The table could seat 20 people. The windows made you feel like you were floating in the sky with nothing beneath you. And Evelyn insisted the meeting be live-streamed. Transparency, she called it. Investors deserve to see how decisions are made. But Nia knew better. This wasn't about transparency. This was about performance. Evelyn wanted an audience for whatever she had planned. Still, Nia prepared like she always did. She reviewed every document 3 times. She memorized every number, every projection, every clause in the contract. She dressed in her favorite navy suit, the one that made her feel like armor. She looked at herself in the mirror that morning and said the same thing she'd said before every important meeting for 10 years. You belong here. You earned this. Nobody can take that from you. But as her car pulled up to Carter Tower, something felt wrong. She couldn't name it, couldn't point to anything specific. Just a feeling in her chest, a whisper in her mind that said, "Be careful. Be ready." She stepped out of the car. The Atlanta sun hit the glass building and turned it into a tower of light. Cameras were already set up in the lobby. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a spectacle. Nia took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked inside. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt like it took forever. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished doors. She looked calm, confident, ready. What she didn't know is that in 3 hours, she would walk out of this building having lost everything and gain something far more valuable. The elevator doors opened, and Evelyn Carter was waiting. She stood at the head of that massive table, surrounded by 12 executives, all men except for her, all of them watching Nia with the kind of curiosity you'd give to something unexpected, something that didn't quite belong. Nia walked forward, professional, poised. She'd done this 100 times before. She extended her hand across that polished oak table. A simple gesture, a professional courtesy, the foundation of every business relationship. And that's when Evelyn smiled. Not a warm smile, not a welcoming smile, a smile that had edges, a smile that cut. Evelyn lifted her palm, just slightly, like she was stopping traffic. "We don't shake hands with people like you," she said. Her voice was clear, deliberate, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for the cameras to catch. The room went silent. Nia's hand hung in the air between them. Time seemed to stop. She could feel every eye on her, could hear someone's uncomfortable cough, could see one executive smirking into his fist. This was the moment, the test, the trap. And in that moment, with her hand still extended and the humiliation burning through her chest, Nia Bennett made a choice. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She didn't give them the reaction they wanted. She slowly lowered her hand, straightened her spine, and said one word, "Understood." Then she sat down. Evelyn's smile grew wider. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd put this woman in her place. She thought she'd just proven who had the power in this room. But what Evelyn Carter didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Nia Bennett had just started a clock, a countdown, a quiet, calculated process that would end with 5 words and $2.4 billion disappearing like smoke. The meeting continued. Papers shuffled. Numbers were discussed. And Nia sat there, calm and still, taking notes. But inside, something had shifted. Something cold and precise and absolutely unstoppable. The trap had been set long ago. Now, Evelyn had just walked right into it. You know that feeling when you're watching something terrible happen and you can't look away? When you see someone being hurt and every part of you wants to scream, stop, but you're frozen. That's what the next hour felt like in that boardroom. Because Evelyn Carter wasn't done. That handshake, or rather, that refused handshake, wasn't the end of Nia's humiliation. It was just the beginning. Nia sat in her chair, her notebook open in front of her, pen in hand. To anyone watching, she looked completely calm, professional, unbothered. But if you looked closely, really closely, you might have noticed something. She was writing down everything. Every word, every slight, every face that smirked, every person who looked away when they should have spoken up. She wasn't taking notes about the merger anymore. She was documenting evidence. The presentation continued. Carter Industries' CFO stood up with his slides, talking about market projections and quarterly earnings. Normal business stuff. But every few minutes, Evelyn would interrupt. "Miss Bennett," she'd say, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I'm sure this is all very complicated for you. Should we slow down?" The men around the table shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Another studied his papers like they were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Nobody said a word. Nia simply nodded. "I'm following perfectly, thank you." Then came the questions. Nia's team had prepared a valuation model, months of research, data analysis, careful projections. When it was her turn to present, she stood up with confidence. This was her expertise, her language, the thing she built her entire career on. She was 3 slides in when Evelyn cut her off. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, though her tone made it clear she wasn't sorry at all, "but these numbers seem ambitious. Are you sure your team knows what they're doing?" Around the table, a few executives chuckled, just quiet enough to feel like agreement, just loud enough for Nia to hear. "Our methodology is sound," Nia replied evenly. "We've used conservative estimates based on—" "Conservative?" Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed. "Miss Bennett, I've been in this industry for 20 years. What you're calling conservative looks more like wishful thinking to me." More chuckles, louder this time. Nia stood there, her presentation frozen on the screen behind her. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the anger, the frustration, the sheer exhaustion of having to prove herself for the 1,000th time. But she didn't show it. She just said, "May I continue?" Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. "By all means, though I think we all know where this is going." And that's how it went. For an hour. Every point Nia made was questioned, every analysis was dismissed. Every time she spoke, she was interrupted, corrected, or talked over. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one small enough to seem almost reasonable. "I'm just asking questions. We need to be thorough. Surely you can handle some constructive criticism." But it wasn't criticism. It was cruelty. Systematic. Practiced. The kind of disrespect that's been perfected over decades in boardrooms just like this one. And the worst part? The cameras were recording everything. This live stream that was supposed to show transparency was now documenting something else entirely. The world was watching Nia Bennett be torn apart, piece by piece. At one point, an executive from Nia's own team tried to jump in. "If I could just clarify the methodology," Evelyn cut him off. "We're not questioning your work, James. We're questioning hers." The message was clear. The disrespect was personal. By 3 p.m., they'd been at it for an hour. Nia's presentation was only half finished, constantly derailed by Evelyn's interruptions. The merger discussion had become a performance, Evelyn showing everyone in that room, everyone watching that live stream, who had the power. Then came the moment that broke something. Evelyn leaned forward, her elbows on that polished table, and looked directly at Nia with something that might have been pity or contempt. It was hard to tell the difference. "You know what your problem is, Miss Bennett?" Evelyn said softly. "You're emotional. You take things personally. This industry doesn't reward emotional ambition. It rewards cold, hard facts. Maybe if you spent less time feeling and more time thinking, you'd understand why we're questioning everything you've presented today." The room went quiet. Even the men who had been chuckling stopped, because that was too far. Everyone knew it. Nia stood there, and for the first time all day her expression changed. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Something flickered behind her eyes. Something sharp and final. "I see," she said quietly. Then she closed her portfolio. "Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to make a phone call." Evelyn waved her hand again. That same dismissive gesture. "Of course. Take your time. We'll be here discussing actual business." More nervous laughter, but quieter now, because something had shifted in the room. Even they could feel it. Nia walked out of that boardroom with her head high, down the hall, past the glass walls where junior employees pretended not to stare. She found an empty conference room, closed the door, and pulled out her phone. Her hand was steady. Her voice was calm. And when she spoke, she said just 5 words. "Execute Clause 8.3. Effective immediately." On the other end of the line, her chief legal officer didn't ask questions. He'd been waiting for this call. They'd prepared for this exact scenario months ago. "Understood," he said. "Initiating now." Nia hung up. She stood there for a moment, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere below, the city was moving, cars flowing, people walking, life continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In that boardroom, Evelyn Carter had just made the most expensive mistake of her career. She'd assumed that power meant she could say anything, do anything, treat anyone however she wanted. She'd forgotten something important. Nia Bennett hadn't come to that meeting to beg. She'd come to finalize a partnership. And partnerships are built on respect. When respect dies, so does the partnership. Nia took a deep breath, straightened her jacket, and walked back into that boardroom like she was walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. The meeting had continued without her. Evelyn was mid-sentence, talking about integration timelines, when Nia sat back down. "Where were we?" Evelyn asked, barely glancing at her. Nia folded her hands on the table. "At the part where arrogance becomes expensive," she said softly. Evelyn frowned. "Excuse me?" "You'll see." For the first time that day, Evelyn looked uncertain. Just for a second, something in Nia's tone, that absolute calm, made her pause. But before she could respond, it started. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Phones around the table started going off. One at first, then two, then all of them. Screens lighting up like fireworks. Executives grabbing their devices. Faces changing from confusion to concern to something that looked like panic. The CFO stared at his phone. His face went pale. Actually pale, like someone had drained the blood from it. "Chairwoman," he said, his voice shaking, "we have a situation." Evelyn's confidence cracked. "What situation?" He looked up, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. "Our primary funding, Bennett Capital. It's gone." The room exploded. Everyone talking at once. Voices overlapping. Someone stood up. Someone else started dialing frantically. "What do you mean, gone?" Evelyn demanded. "Withdrawn. All of it. $2.4 billion. Effective immediately." And just like that, the world stopped spinning. Evelyn turned slowly toward Nia. Her face was a mask of shock and anger and something else. The dawning realization that she'd made a terrible mistake. "You can't do this," Evelyn said. Nia's voice was quiet, calm, almost gentle. "I can, and I did." Around them, chaos. Executives shouting. Phones ringing. Someone turned on the news and pointed at the screen. Headlines were already scrolling across financial networks. Breaking: Bennett Capital withdraws $2.4 billion from Carter Industries. Evelyn stared at Nia like she was seeing her for the first time. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "Yes," Nia replied. "I've protected my capital from contamination." That word, contamination, hung in the air like smoke. The clock on the wall read 3:42 p.m. In less than 30 minutes, Nia Bennett had changed everything. And the best part? She'd done it without raising her voice even once. There's a moment in every collapse where you can see it happen, where everything that seemed solid just crumbles, where power shifts so fast you can almost hear it, like glass breaking or ice cracking under pressure. This was that moment. The boardroom that had been so controlled, so polished, so perfectly orchestrated just minutes ago was now complete chaos. Executives were shouting into phones. Someone had pulled up the stock market on the big screen. And those numbers, Carter Industries' stock price, they were falling. Fast, like watching someone's life savings drain away in real time. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, her hands gripping the edge, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her perfect composure, that queenly confidence, had shattered. She looked at Nia with something close to desperation. "You need to explain this. Right now." Nia stayed seated, calm, almost serene, like she was watching a movie she'd already seen. "What would you like me to explain?" she asked softly. "How you can just take our funding." Evelyn's voice cracked. "We have a contract. We have agreements. You can't just walk away from $2.4 billion. And here's where everything changed, where the trap Nia had set months ago finally snapped shut. Actually, Nia said, opening her portfolio and pulling out a single document, "I can. Clause 8.3, page 47 of our agreement. Would you like me to read it to you?" The room went silent. Every executive stopped what they were doing. The CFO slowly sat down, his face gray. Nia didn't wait for an answer. She read aloud, her voice clear and steady. Either party may withdraw from this agreement immediately and without penalty if any act of misconduct, discrimination, or unprofessional behavior is documented during negotiations. Documentation may include, but is not limited to written records, audio recordings, or video evidence. She looked up. Your legal team approved this clause 6 months ago. They signed it. You signed it. Evelyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The thing is, Nia continued, I didn't add that clause because I expected to use it. I added it as protection. Insurance. Because I've been in enough boardrooms to know that sometimes respect is optional for people like you. One of the executives, the one who'd smirked during the handshake, leaned forward. But that's for serious misconduct. You can't claim. Can I? Nia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. She gestured toward the camera in the corner of the room. The little red light that had been recording this entire time. This meeting was live-streamed. At your insistence, Chairwoman Carter. Transparency. You called it. Well, congratulations. You've been very transparent. The color drained from Evelyn's face. The refusal to shake my hand, Nia said, counting on her fingers. Documented. The constant interruptions and dismissals. Documented. Questioning my competence while praising my team. Documented. And that beautiful line about emotional ambition. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's going to be taught in business ethics classes for years. Around the table, executives were pulling up their phones, searching for the live-stream footage. And there it was. Already clipped. Already shared. Already going viral. The moment Evelyn refused Nia's handshake had been replayed 1,000 times in the last 20 minutes. The comments were flooding in. The business world was watching, and what they saw wasn't just rudeness. They saw exactly what it was. Discrimination wrapped in a smile. You planned this, Evelyn whispered. You wanted this to happen. No, Nia said firmly. I hoped I'd never need that clause. I hoped you'd be professional. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, we could do business with mutual respect. But you made a choice. Actually, you made dozens of choices. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment you treated me like I didn't belong in this room. She stood up, gathering her things with deliberate care. And now I'm making mine? The CFO spoke up, his voice desperate. Miss Bennett, please. If you withdraw this funding, the company will. He couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone in the room knew what he meant. They'd collapse. Instantly. Publicly. Completely. Nia looked at him, really looked at him. He was young, maybe 30, probably worked 100-hour weeks, probably had nothing to do with what happened today. And for just a moment, her expression softened. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it. I know this affects people beyond this room. Good people who are just doing their jobs. But that's not on me. That's on her. She turned to Evelyn. You had $2.4 billion in your hands. Do you know how much power that is? How many people's futures you were holding? And you threw it away. For what? To feel superior for an hour? To put someone in their place? Evelyn finally found her voice. We can fix this. We can renegotiate. I'll apologize. Publicly. We'll make this right. For the first time all day, Nia's mask slipped. Just for a second, you could see the hurt underneath. The exhaustion. The weight of carrying dignity through 1,000 rooms like this one. An apology doesn't erase what happened, she said quietly. And this isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. She picked up her phone, showing Evelyn the screen. News alerts were pouring in. Carter Industries stock plummets 15%, 22%, 31%. That number's going to keep falling, Nia said. And every investor watching this live stream is going to ask themselves, if you treat a $2.4 billion partner like this, how will you treat them? Evelyn grabbed the table again. Please, I built this company. My father built this company. You're destroying decades of work. No, Nia said, her voice hard now. You destroyed it. The moment you decided that respect was something you could choose to give or withhold based on how someone looked, based on whether you thought they deserved it. She walked toward the door, then paused, The entire room was watching her. The cameras were still recording, and what she said next would be replayed millions of times. For anyone watching this, here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about me getting even. This is about drawing a line, about saying that some things, respect, dignity, basic human decency, those aren't negotiable. You don't get to treat people like they're less than you and then expect them to do business with you. She looked around the room at the 12 executives. Most couldn't meet her eyes. Every person in this room saw what happened today, and not one of you spoke up. Not one. You laughed. You went along with it, because it was easier to join her than to stand up to her. One executive, the youngest one, finally spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "You're right. We should have said something." Nia nodded. "Yes, you should have." She walked to where Evelyn stood, stopping just a few feet away, close enough that only Evelyn could hear what came next. "You thought power meant control," Nia said softly, "that you could make people smaller to make yourself bigger. But that's not power. That's just cruelty." Evelyn's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "What is power, then?" "Power is choice," Nia said, "and I just made mine. I chose to walk away from $2.4 billion. I chose to walk away from this deal. Not because I'm emotional, not because I'm weak, but because some things are worth more than money." She started to leave, then turned back one last time. "By the way," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I want you all to know something. That clause, 8.3, I put it in every contract I sign. Every single one. Because I learned a long time ago that you can't assume respect. You have to protect yourself. You have to build in your own safety net." She looked at the camera, speaking directly to it now. "So, if you're watching this, and you're in a boardroom somewhere being treated like you don't matter, being dismissed or disrespected or made to feel small, remember this. You don't have to stay. You don't have to smile through it. You don't have to accept it. Build your power. Protect yourself. And when the moment comes, don't be afraid to walk away." Nia Bennett left Carter Tower at 4:17 p.m. The cameras in the lobby caught her walking out, head high, shoulders back, face calm. She didn't look defeated. She looked free. Behind her, Carter Industries was coming apart at the seams. By 5 p.m., the stock had fallen 38%. By 6 p.m., 3 more investors had pulled out. By midnight, Evelyn Carter's face was on every financial news channel, next to headlines that would haunt her forever. The handshake that cost $2.4 billion. How one insult destroyed a corporate empire. Bennett Capital CEO walks away and takes everything with her. Business schools started calling it a case study within days. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, they all wanted to understand what happened. How did one moment, one refusal to shake hands, lead to such catastrophic collapse? But Nia never gave interviews. She released one statement through her company. Partnerships end when respect does. That was it. 7 words. No explanation. No elaboration. She didn't need to say more. The video spoke for itself. Months later, a reporter managed to track down one of the executives who'd been in that room. He spoke on condition of anonymity, his voice still shaken. "I replay that meeting in my head all the time," he said. "I keep thinking about that moment when she extended her hand and we all just watched. We knew it was wrong. We all knew. But nobody said anything. And I think about what would have happened if just one of us had spoken up. If just one of us had said, 'That's not acceptable.'" He paused. Maybe everything would be different. But nobody spoke up. And everything changed. Carter Industries never recovered. They brought in new leadership, restructured, downsized, but the damage was done. The name Carter was now associated with that moment. That handshake. That failure. Evelyn Carter resigned 6 months later. Last anyone heard, she was living quietly away from the public eye. The empire her father built had crumbled on her watch. All because she forgot something simple. Respect costs nothing. But the lack of it, that can cost everything. As for Nia Bennett, her firm grew. Not loudly, not with flashy headlines, but steadily, powerfully. Other companies, Companies who valued partnerships built on dignity came to her. Leaders who understood that how you treat people matters. And every time she signed a new contract, there it was on page 47, Clause 8.3, a reminder, a protection, a promise that she would never again have to choose between her dignity and her success, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight, isn't to argue, isn't to prove yourself over and over again. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away and take everything with you. So here's what I want you to remember from this story. Your dignity is not up for negotiation. Your respect is not something someone else gets to decide you deserve. And your power, your real power, doesn't come from how much you can endure. It comes from knowing when to say enough. Nia Bennett didn't lose anything that day in Atlanta. She didn't lose the deal. She didn't lose the money. Because those things were never hers to lose, they were Carter Industries to lose. What she kept was something far more valuable, herself. She walked out of that boardroom the same woman who walked in, dignified, strong, unbroken. And sometimes, in a world that constantly tries to diminish you, that's the greatest victory of all. Because Nia Bennett didn't just refuse to be disrespected. She refused to need anything from people who couldn't see her worth. And that's real power. We don't shake hands with people like you. Then I don't do business with people like you. Sometimes the conversation is just that simple.